Hello. Today we will be teaching you Trigonometric Functions Part 2. My name is Sravani and my question is based on the knowledge portion of this unit. One of the most important concepts in this unit was graphing. So today my question is all about graphing. I will first begin by teaching you the general formula. The general formula is f of x is a sine bracket k bracket x minus d bracket bracket plus c. The a value is the amplitude. The amplitude is the distance from the center line to the peak of the wave. It is an absolute value, meaning that it is always positive. Next, we have the k value. The k value helps define the period. If you divide 2 pi by the k value, that then gives you the period. Now we have the d value. The d value indicates a phase shift. The plus or minus sign indicates whether it's to the right or to the left. Lastly, we have the vertical shift. The vertical shift indicates whether the function moves up or down. The direction it moves is determined by the plus or minus sign. Don't forget that a negative sign in front of the leading coefficient indicates a reflection over the x-axis. As well, be aware that sometimes you might have to factor the function in order to get the k value. Let's begin our problem. We are given the function y equals negative 3 cos 2x minus 2 pi over 3 plus 1. For part A, we are asked to determine the amplitude, the period, the phase shift, and the vertical shift for this function. For part B, we are supposed to use the information we just found to graph the function over a domain of negative 2 pi and 2 pi. First, we have to factor the function to get the k value. So we take the function y equals negative 3 cos 2x minus 2 pi over 3 plus 1 and factor that to be negative 3 cos bracket 2 bracket x minus pi over 3 bracket bracket plus 1. To get the amplitude, we have to look at the leading coefficient of the function, which in this case is 3. To get the period, you have to take 2 pi and divide it by the k value, which in this case is 2. So 2 pi divided by 2 is pi. To get the phase shift, we look at the d value. The d value in this function is pi over 3, and there's a negative, so that means that it moves pi over 3 to the right. And lastly, to get the vertical shift, you look at the constant term at the end, and in this case it says plus 1, and that means up 1. Also, don't forget that there is a reflection over the x-axis. I know this because there is a negative in front of the leading coefficient. That concludes part A. Now we are on to part B, and we are ready to graph. Start by setting up your graph. For my horizontal axes, I decided to do 6 boxes to pi. This is because the phase shift is pi over 3, and by using the scale, I could get more precise points. And for my vertical axes, I decided to go up by 1s. First, we're going to look at the vertical shift of up 1 and draw a horizontal dotted line. Then we're going to apply the phase shift of pi over 3 to the right and draw a vertical dotted line. The point where these two dotted lines meet is our new origin. Now onto our period, which is pi. Since we know that it is 6 boxes to pi, we can count 6 boxes from our new origin and plot the points of a cosine graph. I like to connect the dots of the points that we just plotted, but you don't have to. It just helps me visualize better. Now for the amplitude, I just count 3 boxes away from the horizontal dotted line for all the points except for the ones on the dotted line, and then I plot them. Now I'm going to erase my old points and the previous cosine graph. Lastly, there is a reflection over the x-axis, so I'm going to flip my points. I'm going to move my bottom points 3 boxes above the horizontal dotted line, and my top points 3 boxes below the horizontal dotted line. And then I erase my previous points. Now all we have left to do is to connect the dots and continue the pattern. Make sure that your waves are curved and not V-shaped. To plot the points, you have to follow the pattern, and the pattern in this case was 1.5 boxes to the side and 3 boxes up or down. Lastly, just connect the dots. Yay, you're finally done. Here's a closer look at my graph. And that's it. That's the end of my lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a better understanding of graphing trig functions. Thank you for watching. Bye!
Hi there, my name is Aileen, and I'm going to help jog your memory about application trig equation questions within Unit 5 Trig Functions Part 2. Vanelsuk Farms, a local Canadian business, can only grow crops in temperatures above 15 degrees Celsius. The temperature, T, in degrees Celsius, can be modeled by the function T of D equals negative 42 cos 2 pi over 365 D plus 5, with D being the number of days in a year and D equal 1 being January 1st. Between what days is the farm able to grow crops? So before we begin, recall CAST. C-A-S-T. They are all positive in quadrant 1, only sine is positive in quadrant 2, only tan is positive in quadrant 3, and only cos is positive in quadrant 4. With the unit circle, we learned the conversions to radians. 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Beta, an angle with a value greater than 0, is in quadrant 1, with the equivalent value in quadrant 2 being pi minus beta, in quadrant 3 pi plus beta, and in quadrant 4 2 pi minus beta. Going back to the word problem, we are given the function, and we must sub in what we are trying to find, which is 15, for temperature. Our original function is T of D equals negative 42 cos 2 pi over 365 D plus 5. Subbing in the 15 gives us 15 equals negative 42 cos 2 pi over 365 D plus 5. First, what we're going to do is subtract the positive 5 to the other side. That gives us 10 equals negative 42 cos 2 pi over 365 D. Next, we are going to divide the negative 42 to the other side. That gives us negative 10 over 42 equals cos 2 pi over 365 D. We can simplify this to negative 5 over 21, which equals cos of 2 pi over 365 D. We are solving for this angle here, but for now, we'll have it represented as theta. So that's negative 5 for 21 equals cos of theta. Now, to solve for this, we are going to take the inverse of cos. As you can see here, the negative cos is only negative in quadrants 2 and 3, which means to get the answer, we'll have pi minus beta and pi plus beta. So pi minus beta and pi plus beta. So what is beta? Beta is right here, 5 over 21. We ignore the negative because beta must have a value of greater than 0. So the inverse of cos, 5 over 21, this is beta. We will sub this into these numbers here. When you do that, the value for theta is approximately 1.811 and 4.472. However, we are not done yet because theta is only a representation of what we were trying to solve for, which is d. So 2 pi over 365d equals approximately 1.811 and 4.472. Using order of operations, we will multiply the 365 to both answers and then divide by 2 pi, giving us d equal approximately 105.2 and 259.8. As this is a word problem, we must have a conclusion. So therefore, the farm can grow crops from day 105, which is late March, to 260, which is mid-August. Thank you for listening to my trig application question. I hope you learned something.
Hi guys, my name is Aditi and today we're working on trigonometric functions part 2. As you saw earlier with Aileen, we worked on application with solving, but now I will be teaching you application with graphing specifically. So the question we're going to work on today is the housing market sees fluctuation depending on factors such as weather, school vacation, and festivals. Over the year, the peak sales recorded was maximum amount of 14,000 units and the minimum sales recorded was 4,000 units. Now, assume the sales starts at minimum at the beginning of the year. So the first thing we're going to look at is we have to sketch the graph showing the amount of sales during the year. Now the way I do it is I try and I split it into 5 different sections. The first section is to find out the period. So by reading our question, we can see that it says over the year. Over the year means that our period is 1 year, which also means 12 months. The second part is to look and find out the max. In our question, it says the peak sales recorded was a maximum amount of 14,000 units, and the minimum amount was 4,000 units. So that gives us our max and our min points, max being 14,000 and min being 4,000. Now the reason we find our max and our min are to find out our vertical translation. Our vertical translation has an equation, the equation being max plus min divided by 2. In this case, 14,000 plus 4,000 divided by 2, which gives us 9,000. The next part is the amplitude. The amplitude also comes with an equation. It's max minus min divided by 2. In this case, 14,000 minus 4,000 divided by 2, which gives us 5,000. Now that we know all of our information over here, it makes it a little bit simpler when we get to the graphing point of view. I've already set up the graph. All we have to do now is we have to set up all of our information that we found. So period being 12 months, max being 14,000, min being 4,000, vertical translation of 9,000, and amplitude once again 5,000. Don't forget to always include a title and subheading for your application graphing question, as it's a must. So after we know all of this information, we can start by plotting our points. Our max being at 14,000 and we know our min is at 4,000. We also know our amplitude is 5,000, which means to find out our midpoint, we need to add 14,000 plus 5,000, which is 9,000, and same thing, 14,000 minus 5,000 is also 9,000. So clearly indicate that 9,000 is our midpoint. We also know that our first period ends after 12 months. So clearly indicate that to make it a little bit easier on yourself to know when your first period ends. By looking at our question, we know that it says assume sales starts at a minimum at the beginning of the year, which means that our graph starts at 4,000 at the beginning of the year and ends at 4,000 at the end of the year. Because it clearly states that it starts at our minimum, we know that this function is going to be a cosine function, which means that our maximum point comes in between the 0 to 12 months. So to find that out, it's 0 plus 12 divided by 2, which clearly shows that our maximum happens after 6 months. Now the next thing is to find out when during the month is the points at the midpoint, which is at 9,000. To figure that out, we need to do 0 plus 6 divided by 2, which equals to 3. So that means at 3 months, the sales are 9,000. And same thing on the other side. 6 plus 12 divided by 2, which is equal to 9, is when the next sales at 9,000 happens. You can continue this onto our next period, and always remember to curve your graph rather than draw a V, as this is a trigonometric function. Now that we've figured out the entire graph for 2 periods, the last thing to do is to title our graph. I've titled this graph saying sales during the year in Toronto. So we found out the graph in 2 periods, we've titled it, we've added a subtitle, and we have our mini legend at the end. So that shows this graph is perfect. This question is done. Thank you for listening, and I hope you've got a better understanding of application with graphing.
Hi, my name is Rose, and today I'm doing the thinking part of Trig Part 2. For this video, I'll be doing a question on determining the equation. Right now I'm going to recall the general sine/cos curve. Which is y equals a sine k x plus b, and y equals a cos k x plus b. Another one would be y equals a sine kx plus b, and y equals a cos kx plus b. A and k are non-zero real numbers, and b and b are any real numbers, which can be positive, a negative, or zeros. Each of these curves can either be y equals sine x or y equals cos x. For my question, it is write an equation of a sine curve with an amplitude of 6, a period of 3, and a phase shift of 4. So our general basic equation would be y equals sine x, and since we already know the amplitude, which is 6, our new equation is y equals 6 sine x. And right now I'm going to apply a horizontal stretch. So get the period. for k is greater than 0, the curve y equals sine x has a period of 2 pi over k. So then 2 pi over k equals 3. And once we rearrange it, we would get k equals 2 pi over 3. Our new equation ends up being y equals 6 sine 2 pi over 3x. And then apply a phase shift to shift right 4, and then replace the x by x minus 4. Our new equation ends up being y equals 6 sine 2 pi over 3 x minus 4. This concludes this question, and I hope you learned something today by this example. Thank you. Bye.
Finally, you have made it to the communication section of this video. The question is, consider the transformation of the cosine function represented by g of x equals 7 cos 3x minus 2 plus 4. Explain why the phase shift is not 2 rad to the right and determine the actual phase shift. For the function g of x equals 7 cos 3x minus 2 plus 4, the phase shift is not 2 rad to the right because you have to factor the function in order to get the k value and the correct d value.
If you look at our general formula of f of x equals a sine k x minus d in brackets plus c, you can see that our k is used to help us find the period and our d is used to help us find the amplitude. Keeping that in mind, let's go back to our given function. Gx equals 7 cos 3x minus 2 in brackets plus x. The first thing you have to do is you must factor to get the k value and the correct d value.
If we factor out the 3, then we have a k value of 3 and a d value of 2 over 3 to the right. You know that it's a phase shift to the right because of the negative sign. If it was a positive sign, it would have been a phase shift to the left.
Therefore, as you can see, the phase shift is 2 over 3 to the right. Now that we have finished knowledge, application with solving, application with graphing, thinking, and communication, we thank you for listening to our presentation, and we hope you've got a better understanding of trigonometric functions, Part 2.